Hey gang, so I'm going to demonstrate how to glaze larger work with the buckets. So I've gone over pouring and rolling. That's how I'm going to glaze the inside of these two things. So the height on these, while it's not too large, a couple of you made cylinders about like this big. The same techniques will apply to those larger pieces. In a previous demonstration, I glazed this guy, okay? So I believe it's in the video that's labeled Glaze Mixing Revisit, Pouring and Brushing. I demonstrate how to brush on glaze using this piece here. So the top is the application where it's just one layer of being brushed. The center here is the result of the glaze being applied with two layers, and the bottom is the application method of just being dipped, right? So I have this test piece labeled, and it's over here on the board with all the other glaze demonstrated pieces, right? So give this a look. This is the yellow salt, so you can see the difference between the three applications, right? So with one brush on, you get more texture, a little bit more glaze variation. It starts to get covered a little bit more on the application where you brush on two layers, and then the dip, which is really like a three-layer application all in one, so three brushed application all in one shot, is pretty thick, right? There's this leaf right here that you can't really see the impression. So take a look at this guy. I'll just kind of put it here so you can see the video and take notice of things. So with pouring and rolling these, because they're large cylinders, it actually works fairly easily, right? I'm going to take you down below now. So I'm going to use Rutile Chino on, I think, both of these. We'll just keep it scientific. So we'll have two columns, two cylinders with two results with various glaze application methods. So I got my glaze. And just pouring and rolling all the way out, right? So I got some spot to clean up here if I want. I think I'm going to leave this for the demonstration because I'll do a dip application with this one and this guy because I have a lot of lovely texture throughout the whole piece. I'm going to brush this on. So I'll try and pour that a little more cleanly. So if you notice, I pour from the side with this little cup. With the pour spout, it doesn't really actually pour that cleanly. So that worked out a little bit better for pouring. I didn't get a drip wrapping around this side. So instead of starting here, I started at the peak of height of the vessel and poured and rolled, and then got to the end of this little space, which would have, if I started here, I would have had drips. Okay? So nice and clean. looks good. I'll let that set there to dry, and in the meantime, we'll glaze this one. So with the buckets, depending on how much glaze you have in the bucket, gives you certain limitations, right? I can't glaze the whole piece of this guy. If I just dip it straight down, I'll miss the bottom. So nice thing with these block pressings is that you have these registers, these lines on the piece. So I'll dip down to that line on the top, and then I'll flip and dip the base. So it'll be pretty quickly, right? My glaze is mixed up. From here, I'll dip down to that line. Right? So you can see how sharp that line is around the piece. And just from practice and doing this so often, I can hold it fairly evenly upside down, and I can judge when it's on center, right? You don't want to enter at an angle, then you'll have something that's off angle, right? And this is dry to the touch right here. My rim's still really wet, so I'm just going to not touch the rim. So from here, I'll dip the other half. And in and out. And then just kind of shake it off a little bit, getting that excess glaze off. So there'll be a little bit of an overlap right here, but it's in line with that block line, that block pressing line, that register. So we'll see what happens, how it comes out. Now, the great thing about pouring a glaze inside and then dipping the top half and dipping the bottom half, you have an option of using 3 different glazes, right? So let's say I pour the inside with the Rutile-Shino like I did just now. I could have dipped my top half in the Temple White, and then the bottom half I could have dipped in the Mark's Temecula. So I could have had, you know, those different color variations on my pieces, right? But since I want to show the dipping method with the brushing method and how that comes out, we're using just one glaze, right? So that piece is done. For brushing, I think I'm just going to put one application on, because as you saw in the yellow salt demo piece, one application was enough to get a nice variation, and I don't want to cover up too much texture, right? So dipping my chip brush, we have brushes in the glaze area here in a Folgers coffee can. I believe you also have some chip brushes in your kits, right? So I'll start at one end, and that's one application, right? And then just slowly move around. The glaze is pretty fluid. Okay, so that's one application, right? If I let this dry and then brush over this, that will be 2 applications, but I don't want to do that, right? So, and then we'll move down around the piece here. So before I move on to the next section, I always want to dip my brush and get more glaze on there. Because if I'm painting or if I'm brushing with a dry brush, it doesn't have any glaze in it and I won't have good application. So I'm just going to let this dry, and then for the base, I'm going to flip it around. Alright, so adding the glaze as I need. And if you dip your brush and pull up a lot of glaze, or what's the correct words here? When I dip my brush, I want to have a nice soak of glaze on there so that when I apply it, there's enough to make an even coat. Right? It's kind of like one shot. And that's it, right? So I'll have some nice variation between brush strokes. This is fairly even. The color tone is similar throughout the whole brushing process. I can still see some texture. This is perfect, right? So just having one layer of brushing is ideal to leave the most texture that you have possible on your piece, right? If you feel good with the dipping method, do that before. So yeah, we'll take a look at these when they're out of the kiln, right? So I think that's it, right? Glaze appropriately. Everyone's doing really well, and we'll see you soon. Right? Send questions if you have it.